Hi, I'm Rick Kaler. Thanks for joining me. On March 27th, the U.S. Congress approved a $2.2 trillion stimulus bill, which was intended to inject money into the economy to help the millions of workers and small businesses who have been devastated by the COVID-19 closures. The CARES Act provided for $350 billion for small employers, which would be a business that employs under 500 workers. Applicants were required to certify that they believed current economic uncertainty makes the loan request necessary to support ongoing operations. Companies that maintain their payroll during the coronavirus outbreak would receive up to 8 weeks of cash flow assistance. Employers were told that the portion of the loans used for covered payroll cost, which are interest on mortgage obligations, rent, and utilities, would be forgiven. So that means never paid back, basically a grant. Accountants, bankers, government officials all urged small businesses not to dally. The funds were available on a first-come, first-served basis. Panic-stricken businesses complied with that, flooding lenders and the Small Business Administration with requests for funds. Well, complete chaos ensued. Both the SBA and most banks were unprepared and overwhelmed by the demand. The guidelines and application process changed almost daily, and the program ran out of money in just 13 days on April 15th. On April 10th, 5 days before that, USA Today published an editorial by Juliana Glover. And in it, she said something pretty provocative. The title of the story was "Don't Take Free Paycheck Protection Money If Coronavirus Doesn't Threaten Your Business." Glover quoted NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Ruhl's threat to, and I quote, "search until my last breath on earth to match the publicly disclosed EINs of loan recipients with the owners of hedge funds, private equity funds, and the wealthy." Wow. That was the beginning of the PPP public shaming. Business owners who had applied for the funds in good faith began second-guessing their decisions. On April 20th, 5 days after the loan window closed, Senator Marco Rubio promised retribution to firms deemed to have abused the program. On April 28th, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin told CNBC that the government will perform a full audit on any company taking out more than $2 million from the Small Business Loan Program. The SEC followed suit, threatening investment advisors who didn't disclose taking the loans with violations. Now, the problem with these threats was that the guideline to qualify for loans was completely arbitrary. The only requirement, other than having fewer than 500 employees, was the applicant's belief that the uncertainty of the current economic conditions would prove to threaten the ongoing operations of their business, and that a loan was necessary to keep them from having to lay off employees. No time frame was specified. My guess is that nearly all business owners in the U.S. strongly held such a belief. Paul Thorstensen, CPA of the accounting firm Cato Thorstensen, told me all we are left with is another poorly written regulation which is trying to patch a very poorly drafted law. What about a construction company with all of its workers currently employed, but with a real concern that all of its projects will be shut down by authorities? What about a small employer with the personal liquidity to weather the storm, but who will be forced to lay off workers if the economic situation worsens? The fear of regulatory retribution and public shaming is so great that of 8 small business owners I know personally who were approved for PPP loans, 6 refused the funds. As Paul Thorstensen put it, America's small businesses are left under the veil of the threat of fraud, trying to estimate how this COVID disaster will play out. Yet the Treasury will have the benefit of hindsight to determine whether the money was or was not necessary. On May 13th, the SBA acted to mitigate this particular unintended consequence of Congress's good intentions. It added a regulation called FAQ number 46, declaring a safe harbor assumption of good faith, protecting all PPP borrowers with loans under $2 million. So while it worked out for those small business owners that decided with a lot of angst and anguish to take the PPP money, those that were frightened to death by the prospect of a witch hunt and retribution were left out in the cold. Thanks for listening.